What's up, Duval? It's your favorite former Jaguar, Bucky Brooks, and this is Believe in Jaguars, a pod dedicated to breaking out all things Jacksonville Jaguars. And I got to tell you, on this holiday, over the holiday weekend, it's been a lot of fun just kind of doing a deep dive and looking back at some of the things that have taken place over the course of the off season. But I want to go back and kind of focus on some of the comments that Doug Pederson made ahead of OTA starting a week ago. And in a series of comments, he talked about Travis Etienne's importance to the team, but really why the Jaguars want to reduce Travis Etienne's workload. On the surface, that wouldn't appear to be something that you would want for a guy who's been one of your more productive players, but it really is a sensible, I would say, a sensible decision if you're the Jaguars, if you think about his importance and value to the team and how he impacts the quarterback. So let's talk about Travis Etienne. Like going all the way back, Travis Etienne, first round pick back in 2021, coming out of Clemson. He was a running back that, look, a lot of scouts absolutely loved in terms of what he potentially could bring to the table as like an explosive home run back. When you watched him at Clemson, he had well over 4,000 rushing yards, scored 1,000,000 touchdowns, and he kind of did it in spectacular fashion. When I studied him and going back and looking at my notes, look, he was more of a straight line runner, but he had explosive pop. He had the ability to kind of slither in and dip in and out of holes. And he just was a big play waiting to happen time and time again. You would see him catch the ball out the backfield. You would see him do some things that really made him an intriguing option as maybe not like the workhorse back, but a guy that could kind of split the load, play as part of a rotation, and be maybe the runner receiver that most teams are really looking for in the backfield. Well, first season doesn't have an opportunity to play, but the last 2 years, I mean, he's been terrific for the Jaguars. And we talk about terrific, had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. And in fact, like to talk about how good he is while flying under the radar, he and Christian McCaffrey are the only backs over the past 2 years to have 1,000 rushing yards and over 14 scrimmage yards in each of those years in 22 and 23. So think about that. Think about how much the football world loves CMC. Well, the only other back to do things that Christian McCaffrey is doing is Travis Etienne. That tells you how good he is, how good he can be, and the impact that he could make on this offense going forward. Now, why is that important and why are we talking about Travis? Well, recently, Travis had his fifth-year option picked up. That means he is guaranteed to be with the team through 2025. That'll pay him at $10 million, which really is a solid price for what we call an elite marquee running back. $10 million, if you can get him on that, even if you don't sign him to a long-term deal, that $10 million mark puts him in the range of what the upper echelon running backs are making in the league. Now, that makes sense because he is an upper echelon running back. We talked about him and Christian McCaffrey being the only guys to hit those marks. It makes sense. And I don't know if a lot of people really understand or know that Travis Etienne has been that good the last 2 years for the Jaguars. So going back and just thinking about what he's been able to do for the Jaguars, stylistically, this is the type of back that Travis Etienne for the Jaguars. He is a guy who is at his best running on the edges. And when we're scouts and we're talking about running on the edges, we're talking about off tackle plays, getting on the perimeter, things that are not necessarily downhill between the tackles, but right off on the edges. Now, Travis has shown the ability to play with a little more power, run through contact. His balance and body control is terrific. He's improved when it comes to his vision to be able to spot those cutback lanes. And I would also say that he has improved in terms of being patient and disciplined as a runner. For a guy who had it really easy at Clemson, who always produced these big plays, sometimes it's hard for a running back to understand that the best play is just a 4-yard game at this moment, depending on time, situation, circumstance. Hey, just stick your nose in there, get the dirty yards, let's get the first down and continue to extend the drive because that's most important now than big play hunting, big play chasing. I would say over the last couple of years, we have seen that part really improve in his game where I say he's more of a mature runner now than he was when he first entered the league. The other thing that I can say that we have seen from him is each and every year he's improved in a particular aspect of his game. last year, he did a really good job of taking care of the football after having issues the previous year. He had 5 fumbles, I think, in 2022. Last year, he didn't put the ball on the ground. And that is a big thing because turnovers are the biggest deciding factor in the National Football League. And so if you have someone who puts the ball on the ground, they become more of a liability than an asset because they're giving away extra possessions to the opponent. When we look at Travis and we kind of break down his career, things that you like about what he's been able to do as the RB1 for the Jags is he has shown an ability to be a really, really reliable and dependable player when he's been given the workload. I'm sitting here looking at his numbers, and in each of the past 2 years, he's had well over 200 touches as a runner. Then you couple the fact that, look, he's also had on average about 40 receptions in each of the last 2 years. This is a dude that really gets it done in a variety of different ways. What you don't like about what has happened, particularly last year, and so a lot of this might not be his fault, but the production went from averaging 5 yards a carry in 2022 to only 3.8 in 2023. The receiving went from 9 yards in 2022 to only 8.2 in 2023. I think when you look at those numbers, that might be a bit of why Doug Pederson might be just a little worried about the workload. Last year, Travis accounted for 75% of all the running back carries for the Jaguars. I mean, that's a hefty number for a 5'10", 215 back. I mean, that's a big workload for him. Secondly, he has 76% of the total RB touches, meaning that's rushing and receiving, like rushing attempts, receptions. That's a big load. That's 3/4 of like the touches that go into the backfield. They're going to Travis Etienne. Now, while he has been great in terms of being able to kind of get it done and do those things with the touches, it also is one of those things that you begin to worry, like, do you get diminishing returns when you give him more opportunities? And you like what he's been able to do. He started out the box like playing really, really well, but you just wonder over the course of time, does he wear down? And the reason why I say that is let's just these numbers. So the first 9 weeks of the season, Travis was averaging 72.9 rush yards per game. That was 4th in the league. The last part of the season from weeks 10 through 18, he was only averaging 47.2 rush yards per game. That put him right at 29th. We can talk about the musical chairs and the revolving door of people that were playing on the offensive line and how that likely, I would say it did contribute to his like diminishing workload, the decline that we saw from him in this offense. A lot of it can be attributed to the offensive line. I think when you're a coaching staff, though, you're just wondering, man, when we brought him in, did we plan on him having such a hefty workload? This is where Doug Pederson's history comes into fact. So a lot of times when you are a coach, you always go back to your best years, and that's kind of you envision the team that you have going forward operating like. Doug Pederson wins the Super Bowl 2017, 2018 with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles operated with a back by committee situation where they shared the workload between LeGarrette Blount, Jay Ajayi, and then Corey Clement. Those three guys pretty much carried the running game and the receiving game from the backfield. No one accounted for 1,000 rushing yards. When you're Doug Pederson and you see the success that you have, not only with the running backs kind of doing it by committee, but also when you look at that offense, they did it by committee because they didn't have a 1,000-yard receiver. He likely believes that this offense is one that you share the load, you distribute it evenly to all the pieces of the offense, and the sum is greater than the total of the individual parts. The Jaguars may appear to be that. And when you go back and you look at how this team operated in 2022, it's very much in line with that philosophy and that premise where, hey, you may not have A-level performers, but everyone is operating at a B plus level, and the offense just works because it's balanced, and the balance creates challenges for the defense because the diversity of the offense where it can do multiple players can pop up and be kind of the workhorse player for the day, the star of the day, as we call it. Well, Travis Etienne has proven that he can do that, but maybe, just maybe, you want to lighten the load so that he can be fresher down the stretch. So when you get to that stretch run, and we'll talk about it in looking at this year's schedule, the last 6 games of this season, 4 division games, and then the game against the Raiders and the Jets. If you're looking at the schedule and you're kind of building your plan for how this team can get into the postseason, win the division, and maybe make a run, part of the equation is making sure that Travis Etienne can play at his best that last month of December. Can he be playing his best ball December and January? Well, how do you do that to ensure that he's going to be playing at his best? A part of that might be a little load management, making sure that you don't give him too much too soon, but you kind of share the load, you tailor it back, you keep him on a pitch count early so you can unleash him late. When I go back and I look at the early part of the season, I'm looking just at like the touch totals, and I'm seeing 23 touches in the opener, 23 against the Houston Texans, 23 against the Atlanta Falcons in London, 30 against the Buffalo Bills in London in a win, 21 against the Colts, 17 against the New Orleans Saints, and then we have 27 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's a hefty workload. All of those games, we're talking about well over 20 touches. Then it falls off the wagon a little bit down the stretch. Some of that is just due to like maybe game situation and circumstance, but when we go over the last part of the season, he doesn't hit those totals again. Also, maybe it's a coincidence, because he couldn't hit those touch numbers, it also coincided with a lot of losses from the Jaguars. And I know people will talk about the correlation between the running game and wins and losses. It doesn't factor in. A lot of times your running totals go up because you're ahead and you're running the game out, but the numbers are the numbers. And in most offenses, you want your best players to touch the ball. Maybe early when the team had a lot of success, they realized maybe they utilized Travis too much early, and they want to find a way to make sure that they flip that. Maybe you want to use him heavy, like have a heavy dosage, a high utilization rate or high usage rate, as they were talking about in basketball, a high usage rate down the stretch, because those games early that I talked about, Jaguars, I'm looking at the total, seven wins, only 2 losses. Maybe you want to flip the script, make sure that he is becoming a bigger factor in the offense as a runner the last part of the season. Now, to do that, it doesn't necessarily take Travis improving. It takes the team having more trust in a guy who should have been a big part of the offense last year, and that is Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby, the 3rd round pick from last year, coming out of Auburn, was expected to be a guy that would take some of the weight off of Travis's shoulders. This is a guy that was big, physical, coming out of Auburn, who's 6 foot, 210 pounds, downhill runner, really rugged in terms of his playing style, but also caught the ball out of his backfield. He was a violent finisher, meaning that you could count on him to do some of the dirty work that maybe Travis isn't necessarily built for. Not saying that he can't do it, but from a body frame and from a playing style, maybe he is not ideally suited to be the downhill runner that gets all the dirty, hard yards between the tackles. When Tank came in, you saw him during the preseason. He flashed a little bit. You saw some of the talent. You saw some of the explosiveness and some of the physicality and ruggedness that he offered. However, early in the year, when he had his opportunities, had some mistakes that might have been costly. Had a fumble, had a missed pass that ended up leading to an interception, didn't appear to kind of have it all together as a young player. Some of that is to be expected because he's making a transition from college to pro. But what happens, coaches begin to lose a little trust in you if you can't hold onto the ball, you don't know exactly what you're doing, or you appear to have some hesitancy when it comes to different parts of the offense. But by not playing Tank, maybe what you did is you wore down your workhorse in Travis Etienne. So when you hear Doug Pederson and even Trent Baalke, general manager for the Jaguars, talk about Tank Bigsby and how important it is, part of the reason why they're beginning to place a greater priority in making sure that he is a part of the offensive plan is because they know that collectively, Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby gives the Jaguars a 1-2 punch that could be a very formidable punch. I speak back to the Eagles rotation back 2017, 2018 when they won the Super Bowl, and how the interchangeable parts of LeGarrette Blount, Jay Ajayi, and Corey Clement allowed this team, that Eagles team, to do a bunch of different things to keep the offense afloat. diversity. You had a power runner in LeGarrette Blount. You had another power runner with speed and explosiveness in Jay Ajayi. And then you had a rugged runner in Corey Clement, who was also a factor out of the backfield. The Jaguars have similar traits when you just combine what Tank Bigsby can do with Travis Etienne. So how does it factor in, and how do we look at it when it comes to the team? A lot of the conversation that we have had this offseason and with this offense has been about what are we going to do with the skill players on the outside? Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram. We have talked about that quartet and how the Jaguars need to throw it around the yard, who's going to be the true number one receiver, all of those things. With more big play potential in the passing game, what should happen is the running game should open up. We'll talk about the offensive line in another podcast, but it should create more space for Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby to be able to do their thing between the tackles and on the edges. As Gabe Davis and as Brian Thomas Jr. really acclimate to this offense and they begin to carve out their own respective roles on the perimeter. Deep ball element, being able to push the ball down the field, well, that's going to force safeties to back up. Maybe this year the Jaguars see more too deep coverage with a lighter box that creates more favorable opportunities to run the football. Last year, potentially because you couldn't stretch the field and you were having a tough time at the line of scrimmage, man, it was hard to find room for Travis Etienne. Some of that is just like getting whooped at the line of scrimmage, but some of that is just too many bodies inside. As the Jaguars spread it out and as they utilize 11 personnel, one back, one tight end, 3 wide receivers, as they throw the ball down the field, because we talked about Brian Thomas Jr. being a guy who averages over 16 yards per catch at LSU, who puts the ball in the paint. He had 17 touchdowns his final season with the Tigers. And then Gabe Davis, who we talked about being a guy who's a big play machine, 27 touchdowns during his time with the Buffalo Bills. Yards per catch average always in that 15 to 16 yard area. Well, now that forces everyone to back up a couple steps. It forces defensive coordinators to make decisions on how do we want to defend the Jaguars? Do we want to keep the safety in the box just in case they run the ball, or do we want to back up and make sure that we put a cap on the deep ball, take that away, and allow them to run the ball? Well, with the personnel that is now outside, Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby should find more room. And even though I am sitting here saying that Travis Etienne needs to be the lead horse, there's a room and a plan to get Tank Bigsby in the mix where he can do some of the dirty work, short yardage situations, goal line situations. And I would say, hey, man, how about every third series, Tank Bigsby goes in the game and he has an opportunity to run that series as the back. When you do that, you now are reducing some of Etienne's workload, but you're keeping him fresher and you're allowing him to be unleashed in the passing game, in the screen game, running option routes and doing some of that CMC, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara type stuff that should enhance his role and allow him to have maybe more effectiveness and efficiency with a lighter workload. So to me, this training camp, this offseason has been about finding a way to unlock the pair in the backfield. Travis Etienne as the lead horse, Tank Bigsby as the complement. How can you get these two guys going? Here are some thoughts. So the first thought is we talked about the rotation and maybe doing a 2-to-1 rotation in the backfield, meaning Travis Etienne plays 2 series, then Tank Bigsby comes in, they do it. The other way that you can do it is create an offense where on your call sheet, you have packages that put different running backs in the game. So for instance, sometimes you have 11 personnel. We talked about a 3-wide package where you have Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and then Gabe Davis are all in the field. But then you have Travis Etienne in the backfield. The next time you tried out 12 personnel package with Bretton Strange, Evan Ingram on the field, your 2 tight ends, you got 2 wide receivers. It could be Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk or whoever. But then you put Tank Bigsby in there and you do more of a physical run game stuff. And what you're doing is you're just kind of playing the shell game where you're trying out different personnel packages to force the defense to match up, but you're changing the runner in the backfield based on the play calls that you may want to run out of those packages. It takes a lot of organization and discipline to do that, but it certainly is done. And having played with Doug Pederson in Green Bay when Coach Holmgren was the coach, That is how Coach Holmgren would do. It's just a matter of organizing it, making it happen, and making sure that you prioritize that. I want to make sure that we have this player, Tank Bigsby, in the game 12 to 15 snaps per game to make sure that he has opportunities. That is a way to do it. But regardless, you want to make sure that both of these guys are intimately involved or heavily involved in the game plan. You want to give them opportunities to do their thing and do things that plays to their strengths. So if we run into power game, maybe that is more of a Tank Bigsby series where we run the power, the counter, and those things. If we're running zone runs or things that are on the perimeter, toss flips and those things, maybe those are plays that Travis Etienne needs to be in the game. Regardless, you want to play to your players' strengths and you want to give them an opportunity to maximize what they're able to do. In the passing game, how does it matter? How does it factor in? Well, to me, I think Travis Etienne is one of the best screen runners that we've seen. He is terrific in terms of his patience, his ability to catch it, and then really finding ways to maneuver behind the offensive line. He reminds me a lot of Jamal Charles when Jamal Charles was at his peak in terms of the way that he could catch the screen and the way he can turn those short passes into big plays. We need to see more of that from Travis. We need to see more of that prioritizing the call sheet. In a perfect world, the way that I would see it with Travis Etienne when it comes to the pitch count, we would see maybe 15 to 17 runs, 5 to 7 receptions, some way, shape, or form on average. Doesn't have to happen every week, but to me, that's how you fully maximize what he's able to do. When it comes to Tank Bigsby, 6 to 8 carries each and every week. Pencil him in, script him on the game plan, but make sure that he touches the ball 6 to 8 times on downhill runs. Allow him to be a little bit of that sledgehammer that LeGarrette Blount was once for Doug Pederson back in the day. But if you get both of these guys in the mix, you utilize the talents that they bring to the backfield, you now upgrade the running game, but you also force defenses to kind of defend the Jaguars in a different way. And you're able to create mismatches and exploit those mismatches by the personnel that the Jaguars have. Sure, it's a lot dependent upon the offensive line and what they do, but we'll talk about that. They'll get that part fixed. But I think in the backfield, the Jaguars have a great opportunity to create the kind of problems and mismatches that leads to a lot of points from this offense and this team. And as we think about how this team needs to play to not only win the division, but to make a deep postseason run, it's going to be heavily dependent on the offense. And I think those guys, Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, have to be major factors, major players. So those are my thoughts on the backfield. Those are my thoughts on Travis and Tank Bigsby. Leave comments. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on all the podcast platforms. Make sure you check us out on the Believe Network on Fubo. We have a lot of great podcasts. Now, just Believe in Jaguars. There's some other stuff. So if you have an interest in another team or other sports and all that, we got you covered on that. But make sure you just keep coming back because the Believe in Jaguars podcast community is growing. I want to continue to see it grow as we get closer and closer to training camp and the season. So until next time, I'm Bucky Brooks. Just Believe in Jaguars. I'll talk to you soon.